So guys, welcome to Mind Your Property. So this is our monthly delve into mindset around property. And if anyone knows me, it is so incredibly important. I think anything in life, if you want to achieve great things, you really have to work on your mindset. There's only a certain amount of knowledge that you can gain, and unless you work on your mindset, you're not necessarily going to be able to get there, or it's not going to be an easy way of getting there. So I'm really thrilled. I've been working with Lee Rubeck for the last 2.5 years. He's absolutely transformed my life in so many ways. I consider him to be, you know, a dear friend as well. He is a really special human being, and has gone through quite a journey to get through where he is as well. So all very interesting. So while we're all on here, I would really appreciate it if everyone could reach out and ping some people who perhaps would really benefit from having a better, as we're saying, to know how to create the self-image of a property investor that you want to become. So this is really huge and was a massive game changer for me, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into that. So I'm going to repeat that again: how to create the self-image of the property investor you want to become. So please guys, do ping some other people so we can start filling up this room. And just to confirm, we are on what's it called? We are on YouTube. Oh, and Joy's just behind me going out. Okay, so there we go. We've got everything happening today. I love it. Okay, let me just pull that. Okay, so Lee, please do introduce yourself, and then we can jump straight in.
Good afternoon, Emma. Good afternoon to everyone listening right now. It's good to be here again this month, and my name is, as you stated, Emma, my name is Lee Rubeck, and I'm from Johannesburg in South Africa, and I don't know how to put this humbly, but I'm one of South Africa's best trained speakers, and there's a really good reason for me saying that. I was trained at the so-called Harvard of professional speaking schools. It's called the Bill Gove Speech Workshop in July 2014. And what is it that I do? I help entrepreneurs remove money blocks and attract clients easily. And I work with business people like Emma from all around the world. And I'm really excited about the topic we're going to be getting into here today: how to create the self-image of the property investor that you want to become, because you can never outperform your self-image, and I really want us to go deeply into that today.
Amazing, amazing. And I have to say, before I met you, this was not something I'd really considered. You know, certainly when I started my property journey, I'd heard things such as, you know, fake it before you make it. And I kind of, you know, got bought into that a little bit, but it still didn't really resonate. I didn't really understand it. So it wasn't until I met you and we started talking about these things that I really truly understood. And then of course you get told practically what you need to do, but then it isn't until you go through that process. And well, I know that I look totally different to what I did 2.5 years ago. You've certainly seen that. I act totally differently. I walk totally differently. I speak differently. I mean, even to the point where sometimes I'm kind of pinching myself. Did I really just talk about things like that? Am I really mixing with these people? And then I just think, yeah, that's me, or whatever I have to say to remind myself that, of course, this is the way forward. So, Lee, I'd love you to just sort of give us a bit more information about this kind of self-image, and you know, and how it can affect us.
So your self-image is your concept of yourself. You know, Emma, you spoke about people talking about fake it until you make it. That's all good and well, but it could sort of create an imposter syndrome where you've got this inner voice that that's talking against you, or some negative self-talk that's saying, you know, you're not that person like your experience is. But imagine when you take an idea, concept of self, and you shift it internally, then it does not matter what's happening on the outside, because the thing is, if you've got that negative self-talk, that's a clear indication of where the self-image is tuned. But anyway, your self-image is your attitude to yourself. It's concept of self. It's how you see yourself. Now, the man who formulated or invented modern-day self-image psychology was a man by the name of Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And his story is different in that, you know, he was a plastic surgeon. He was, you know, doing work on people's faces. Maybe they had a bad scar on their face, or, you know, maybe a skew nose, and they wanted to fix up this disfigurement or this mark on their face. And Dr. Maltz, being a plastic surgeon, he'd fix the problem up for them. But he realized with some people, there was a marked exterior change. So after the successful operation, they acted differently, they showed up differently, right? And then he also noticed with some other people, regardless of how successful his work was on them, there was no exterior change, which led this doctor to formulate the idea or the theory that you've got two images. You've got the image that comes back from the mirror. That's the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you dress, you meet and greet people. And the other image is the way you see yourself inside. So it's this self-image, which is your concept of self. And ultimately, the way you see yourself on the inside has to show up on the outside. And that's basically what self-image is, Emma, and how it kind of, as you know, as a segue or as an introduction, how it affects us in our lives.
Yeah, and that is an incredible thing. And I know that the description that you say that you can't get you can't achieve more than where your level of self-image is. And again, we work with, Bob Proctor, sadly not with us, but he sort of talks about changing, multiple times his self-image, because you get to that level. So it's kind of like, I see it as you get to that ceiling. We hear of the glass ceiling, don't we? But it's true, you get to that glass ceiling and, you're thinking, the way you think when you're in debt, for instance, is going to be very different to the way you think when you earn £50,000 or when you earn £100,000. And certainly if you're in property, your self-image is going to reflect what kind of deals you go after, how many deals you go after, how confident. And, I'm really fortunate I get to talk to so many sort of newbie property investors, and then property investors who've gone through and been really successful, and others that have been on it for a year and haven't really done much. And sometimes, you're really looking at these people and thinking, well, what is it that's maybe holding you back? And I do find this whole kind of self-image and changing who you are, and that's where I really started learning about it, was when you would be talking about, you think differently. So if you want to become a millionaire, you need to think like a millionaire. You can't still be thinking like somebody who earns 100 grand a year, because you're just never going to get there. So yeah, really, yeah, incredible there. So where does this self-image come from? I mean, how is it sort of created? Is it genetic? Where do we come from with this picture of ourselves that probably most of us are really quite unaware of?
So your self-image was created firstly at the moment of conception. So a little cell from mom and a little cell from dad came together and formed the nucleus of you. And there was ideas and habits, things programmed right there at the moment of conception. But more important than that is your environment. environment is more important than hereditary. So here in your little life, you come into the world and your subconscious mind, that emotional part of you, where your self-image lives, is wide open. Your conscious faculties haven't formed yet, right? That's why a baby's perfect, right, Emma? Because, you know, there's this subconscious is wide open. And all the ideas in that first 3-4 years from the external environment are being programmed into this baby. Now, whether those ideas with regards to self that you got fed were empowering, or whether those ideas were negative, whether you came out of an environment of lack and limitation, you know, maybe why do we have third, fourth, fifth generation welfare recipients? It's the ideas that were programmed into the mind, the environment, right? And so here you are, and you programmed at the moment of conception and in your little life. So that's how your self-image is formed. And we tend to, and it's all happening subliminally, so it's happening below the surface. We take on ideas that others tell us to be true about ourselves. So, you know, maybe Emma, you've got beautiful eyes, or Emma, you're really talented, or you're really a talented hockey player, or Emma, you just never amount to anything, or, you know, how many times have you heard about teachers telling kids that they're stupid or they're not going to amount to anything? I mean, and here's this malleable little person with their mind wide open. You're standing in a position of authority and you feed them that nonsense. And we take on those ideas and we accept it to be true about ourselves. And that's what forms the self-image in your little life. And then that affects how we see ourselves. So their voice becomes a voice in our minds. So I'll never amount to anything, or I'm just not naturally smart. And what also happens is if we make mistakes, which is a normal thing, right? We learn. That's how we learn, right? Through a process of trial and error throughout our lives, whether we play football or whether we, taking on a new vocation or we start in a business or whatever it is, it's through that mistake, or that failure process that we actually learn. A lot of people are scared of failure and they take it very personally. They emotionalize their mistakes. Now, if you rack up failure after failure after failure, and you don't know how to deal with it from a mental perspective, that gets embedded in your self-image. So one example, if you have a failure in a relationship, maybe it's someone you really love, and they reject you, or it doesn't work out well. You then personalize, and I'm not saying we got to be detached from reality, but it's just we give that situation so much power over us. Like it's almost like we'll tell ourselves, I must be no good if he doesn't want me or if she doesn't want me. And that affects our self-image. Or if you've had huge victories in your life, maybe you've been the top student in your graduating class at university, or maybe you've gifted your son his first home, or your mother, you bought a home, whatever it is, that's a huge victory, and that would affect your self-image. So we're going to understand how it's formed and what affects it, because remember, it's I'll say again, it's in your emotional mind. So these huge emotional impacts throughout your life get embedded into that concept of self, into that self-image.
Yeah, very powerful. So just touching on a couple of things that you mentioned there. So kids being one of them, and obviously for you and I, that's very dear to us. I've got 2 older boys, and certainly I was very aware of my language when they were little, but I was only aware of a really small part of my language with them. And so some things I can see were really positive, and other things I can see, perhaps, could have been better, but that's the way it is. And now I've got a younger one coming through who's 7, and again, really aware of what I'm saying to her. And again, I'm sure I'm doing something right, and I'm sure there's other things. But is there anything, just from that perspective, from a child's perspective, talking about, we already have a self-image in there. But as far as, you know, for any of us who've got kids, you know, obviously, especially when they're young, but can you, you know, aid them as they're growing older as well in what we can share with them, and sort of help overcome the things that may be being said in school, for instance?
Absolutely, Emma. So, I mean, I think firstly, kids learn not necessarily by what we say to them, but by what we do. So as you upgrade your self-image, as you upgrade your self-talk, as you upgrade your language to world-class language, and you become a better version of yourself, that's naturally going to rub off on them. And then secondly, even if that little girl of yours or that little boy of yours is 7, 6 years old, they've got a mind just like you and I, and you've got to understand the minds. You've got to understand you've got a conscious mind and a subconscious, and of course what's happening in your emotional, the subconscious affects the body. And the only thing, you know, that little one lacks is vocabulary and experience. But outside of that, they've got the exact same mental faculties that you and I have. And what you have to do is really pump their minds full of positive, uplifting stuff, because the world is not going to do it. The media is definitely not going to do it. You know, the default position, and sad to say, most people are operating in a negative frequency or in a negative vibration. And the world is not going to do the job for us, so we got to do it. So, you know, with my little boy, Emma, you know about this. I went and I purchased some self-talk albums. You know, whenever he was in the car with me, still I do it up until today, and my one is 9 years old. And I play these self-talk albums. When he was 3 years old, it was a self-talk album by Shad Helmstetter. And if you've got little ones, you might look into Shad Helmstetter. He's got, excuse me, he's got a website called, I think, the Self-Talk Store. And these self-talk, or the one I bought initially, I think it was from infancy to 7. And there was just 6 tracks on it, but you play it repetitively over and over, because there's one of 2 ways you're going to shift your self-image. One is through the emotional impact, which we've already spoken about, and the other way is through constant spaced repetition over and over. So basically, you want to have them in an environment, or create an environment for them where you pumping empowering ideas into their minds. Whether it's you playing, you know, a motivational video, or you on a program and a course in your home and playing it loudly so that everybody can hear it, that will work. You know, playing it in the car, you know, your language when you're around them. And I promise you, if you do this over the period of months, weeks, years, you're going to notice their language is going to start to shift. And, you know, that's what I've noticed with my little guy. And I'm sure you noticed it with your little one as well, Emma, with Rosabella, that the language starts shifting, and then you know that it's starting to embed in their subconscious.
Fantastic, thank you. Just going into that, I just need to mute this person. Yeah, just going into that as well, what is interesting, talking to investors, and exactly as you said, the way they talk and what they say, a lot of people must have a lot of self-talk, and so you don't hear it. You could probably tell from the way they behave. But some people literally belittle themselves out loud, don't they? Oh, I'm rubbish at that, or I could never do that, or oh, I'm so this and I'm so that. And obviously over time, I've really learned to be listening to that, and it's like these terrible things. And you talk about an emotional impact, and obviously constant spaced repetition. And for me, I've had to do the constant spaced repetition to make these changes. But there has been a couple of people, and one particular I really remember, I feel so honored to sit there and still watch her journey, is she sat down and she was just so derogatory to herself and kept saying it, and I kept sort of, you know, mentioning, you know, you've got to be really careful, you know, what you're saying to yourself. And anyway, we talked about the things that she had said to herself, and then I just said to her, would you say those things to your children? And she looked at me so shocked and literally burst into tears, and obviously I'm there going, oh no, what have I done? But it was a total emotional impact. And I said, if you won't say it to your kids, you can't say it to yourself, because your kids will naturally pick up what you say. So the fact that you're not saying it to yourself, and you're not saying it to your kids, you're saying it to yourself, they're going to naturally think that's a normal thing to say to yourself. They're going to pick up those things. So yeah, so that was a big sort of one for me. And then secondly, when you talked about what we expose family to as well, and it's slightly off topic, I suppose, but is people allowing their children to listen to the news. Now, to me, I think there should be an 18 rating. I mean, the things that are on the news, you'll get, I remember saying that, I think it was like 10 o'clock on Christmas morning, we walked into my parents' house and they just have the news on. That's it. It's always on, background noise. And they were talking about rape on Christmas morning. I can't even say it out loud. I want to whisper about it. You know, it was so horrifying. And I will not, in fact, I went into a shop the other day with my daughter, and the news was playing in the background, and I literally grabbed her hand and walked out the shop because it was saying things that were totally inappropriate for a young mind. So yeah, so sorry, there's my rant. I'm so passionate about that. I just don't want anyone to be exposed to those kind of things. It's just a really scary place to be. So but anyway, thank you yeah, for sharing about how we kind of create it and how we do that. So, you know, once we know how it's kind of created and things, how is that then kind of affecting us? How does that work?
So Emma, I just wanted to comment on what you shared there. The power of life and death is in the tongue. And why would you express or say something that you don't want to become a part of your reality? Like, how often do you hear people say, you know, I've got a bad memory, or I'm not really good with money, you know, and what they say it over and over, and it becomes a part of your self-image, you know. The thing is, even if your current reality is a condition or circumstance or a situation that you're not necessarily happy with, and you don't, I mean, understand that it's there, but start with a new train of thought and start talking about what it is that you do want. So if you don't have a good memory, say I've got a great memory. Even if you just say it to yourself for a couple of months, and I promise you, power of life and death is there. So you keep saying that to yourself. I mean, you know that, Emma, it's eventually going to become your reality. So,
and with that, so sorry to interrupt, Lee, with that, I was one of those people who used to say, I've got a terrible memory. And I literally, because I now look for positive memory experiences, like I've got to my car before and I've gone, you've forgotten something, and then walk back to the house. And as I'm walking back to the house, I've been, that is awesome. I've got a great memory, because in the past I may have got in the car, driven an hour and realized that I've forgotten something. So now I'm really aware of those things that make you believe in what you're telling yourself. If you look for it, it's a bit like looking for a red car, isn't it? If you're going to buy a red car, suddenly every car is red. And it's looking for those things. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add to that.
Maybe just to relate it to the property investors that are listening to this right now. If you're sitting down with a potential investor, somebody who's going to come along with you in this property deal, and you're telling yourself, your self-talk is, they're not going to want to, you know, do business with me, or, you know, I'm not the right person, or they're going to figure out I'm a phony. Whatever it is happening inside, I promise you that person you're sitting down with, they can feel it. Because you communicate on two levels. You communicate intellectually on your conscious level, So you're saying, you know, this is a great deal. Here's a proposal. You know, we've worked all the numbers out. You know, just review it and get your name. You're saying this is a good deal, but emotionally you're communicating something else, and vibrationally you're sending out a double binary message, and people can pick that up. So you've got to be very careful about your self-talk. I mean, like Emma said, we wouldn't say certain things that we say to ourselves, to our kids. Why would we say to ourselves? It's almost like we're aware of it, but we treat ourselves in a crap way, for lack of a better word, Emma. You know, we got to be very conscious of what you're saying to yourself. So in terms of how the self-image works, let's get into that. It works pretty much like if you've got an air conditioner in your home, and do you guys in the UK, do you operate on degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit? Celsius, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's say you set the aircon in your room to 24 degrees Celsius. And it's the middle of winter, it's December time up in the UK, and your husband and wife come in. I know all your homes are heated, right? That's been my experience.
There's very few aircon. Like at the moment, we're having hot weather, so you traipse to the supermarket where it's like, oh, this is nice and cool. But there's, yeah.
And your home, Emma, I mean, you have a heating system, right?
All heating. I mean, some people will have a bit of aircon, but most people, it's all about heating.
Okay, so let's say you do have an aircon and you set it to 24 degrees. Maybe the air conditioner is in your study or in your office at home. And your wife or your husband comes home. It's the middle of winter, it's December, January, and they leave the door wide open, front door wide open, and a gust of cold wind blows in. And the temperature in your study or in that room drops down to 17 degrees or 18 degrees. The thermostat in that air conditioner will pick up that deviation from the set code, which is the 24 degrees Celsius. It starts blowing out hot air, the air conditioner. You go and you close the front door, and eventually the temperature in the room will get back up to 24 degrees. That all happened automatically with no interaction on your part. It was automatic. Now, the self-image in your subconscious mind works exactly the same. So if we've got a limited image of ourselves as a property investor or as somebody that's running serviced accommodation, maybe 12 units or whatever it is, you've got an inferior image with regards to that. If you step out to take action, like massive action, the self-image is going to talk you out of it. It's your attitude to yourself. So that's where this negative self-talk is going to come about. Like you can't do this. It's never going to happen. Whatever it is, you're not going to get the finance for this deal. Whatever it is, but that's going to. And the thing is, because the self-talk is so important, and because your image of self is so important, you're going to sabotage yourself if your image is not in alignment with what it is that you're going after. Just like that air conditioning system, it will bring you right back up or right back down to your set point. Maxwell Maltz, like I said, when we introduced this lesson, Emma, he invented self-image psychology. And the book he wrote in 1960 was called Psycho-Cybernetics. And I mean, that's second one's a very big word. I didn't understand, when I got into study of the mind, I didn't understand that word. I do now. Psyche is obviously the Greek word for mind, and cybernetics is the science of control and communication in the animal and in some machine. So essentially,
you really impressed me the way you remember that. That is quite a memory there.
Emma, that is textbook. I think you also know the answer to that. I've been studying these ideas for a long time. But basically, I mean, it's two big words, but basically what Dr. Maltz was telling us is that you've got a control mechanism in your mind. So Just like that air conditioner, the thermostat is a control mechanism for the temperature in that room. Another good example, Emma, is you hop on a plane. Let's say you live in London Heathrow and you're heading over to Boston, Logan International Airport. And you hop on a Virgin Atlantic flight and you're flying across the ocean. Obviously, the pilots, they've set Logan International as the destination, but you're flying somewhere over the Atlantic there, and you hit some turbulence. You hit some turbulence and the plane is taken off track. What happens is the automatic pilot, cybernetic mechanism, an automatic mechanism, picks up the deviation from the set point, which is Boston. It activates the flaps, the thrust of the plane, and it changes the course, and eventually it will bring the plane right back on course, and you'll land at Logan International, just as intended, right? It's been said that the rocket fails its way to the moon. So it's also got a cybernetic mechanism, and it's always this process of correct. Now, this is how your self-image works, and I'm going to make it relevant to us, maybe as entrepreneurs, or let's say you've got the image internally. Your self-image is that you are overweight. That's your concept of self in your subconscious mind. And yeah, we get it from our little life, right, Emma? So you were told, you're fat, or you're just, you're chubby, or whatever we've fed growing up. And here you've got this fat image of yourself. And you go on a diet. So you literally starve yourself, or you make a commitment. You don't like what you see coming back from the mirror. The clothing is not fitting. And you go on a diet, and you committed. But because the image is not changed, you start dropping the pounds, you start dropping the weight, you start shedding, the weight. But the self-image, because it has a set point, it's an automatic mechanism, it picks up that deviation. You start losing weight, it picks up the deviation. Says, no, Lee, Emma, this is not your set point, and it starts correcting you, and eventually you'll be right back onto the sofa with the chips, in front of the Netflix, not going to exercise like you were doing, and you come right back to where you were in terms of weight. And often people put on an extra few more kilos or pounds. And that right there, this self-image is the reason why people go throughout their life up, down in terms of weight. Whereas if people understood these concepts or how this worked in terms of mindset, they could go to the root cause of the behavior, the root cause of the result, which is self-image. As a property investor, you want to go to the root cause of what's creating your financial results. I promise you, you go there, everything on the outside has to change. All of the great leaders of the past, they've disagreed on virtually everything, right? But they've all agreed that you and I become what we think about. But it's not necessarily what you're thinking on a casual, on a conscious level. It's what you think about yourself at that deep level, what's contained in your self-image. Another example, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you've been in business for the past 15 years. The best year you've had is, let's say, £240,000. And as entrepreneurs, we sales, right? That's the best year you've done, 240K for the year, which means you're selling £20,000 per month in product or service. And you've been doing that for the past 5, 7, 6 years. And that's part of your image, it's part of the way you see yourself. And let's say 1 month, something happens to drop your sales down to, let's say, 15,000 or 10,000. The next month, you probably go up to 25 or 30,000. But at the end of the year, you'll have your £240,000 in terms of sales. Now, not only does it affect our weight, does it affect our ability to sell, this self-image affects our relationship with money, it affects how we dress, how we walk, how we talk, our confidence. I mean, self-image, talk about confidence, that is literally the the root cause of your confidence. You know, some individuals, regardless of background, where they come from, they are supremely confident that they've got a healthy image of themselves. And here's the thing, regardless of the environment you are in and how your self-image was created, you can upgrade it, you can change it. And if you want to do well in business, and if you want to do well as an entrepreneur, as a property investor, you have to upgrade your self-image.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's that the whole kind of autopilot or, you know, air conditioning unit is just a very powerful one, isn't it? And we see it so often, you know, footballers, you see it with you know, lottery winners, all of these people, unless they've changed inherently who they are, you know, the reason that they have no money or a limited amount, or, you know, is because they're not that person. They don't have their self-image. They don't believe it. So it is a powerful one that, again, going back to your points that we've touched on in the last couple of months, when you're not getting those results that you want, it's looking back at what exactly it is that, you know, you're maybe could change or need to change. And one of those has definitely been a big one for me, is this whole self-image, and it's kind of this inner confidence that you don't necessarily have, you have to force through. And, you know, now, you know, I'm really enjoying, you know, speaking to, you know, other businesses, talking about deals that are just, it's like Monopoly. It's kind of almost like a crazy scenario, but it's like, you know, it's almost like, well, why not? You know, why is somebody else any better than me? I mean, they're just another human being. And the one thing that, you know, makes me believe in that is somebody like Bob Proctor, who literally went from, you know, somebody who very much wasn't successful, very negative, ill all the time, you know, very much in debt, blah, 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 can turn himself around to have, you know, global businesses, but he's still just a normal average person, you know, not necessarily anything special. And I think that is really tremendous when you meet really successful people. Like we've got Paul McCartney, the singer, who lives near us. And I've spotted him, you know, and I'm really overwhelmed. It's like, wow, he's so special, but he's not special. And when you talk to people, he's so generous, he's so kind. And we often see there's a black helicopter that goes over where we live, and I'm always like, oh, is that Paul's helicopter? But when you talk to his neighbors, he's so normal, he's so down to earth, you know, and the way he talks to them is like, you know, just normal people. He's really kind, there's no airs and graces, and you know, so these people are normal, but they've done amazing things. So there's something within them that sort of keeps that going. So yeah, amazing. I was gonna, sorry, you Karen. Yeah,
I think someone like Paul McCartney is just very comfortable with himself. You know, he knows who he is. You know, the money of the superstardom hasn't fit his ego to a level where it's literally overtaken him. I mean, you know, you mentioned two really great examples there with regards to self-image. You know, somebody winning the lottery, or these huge football stars. Someone wins the lottery, if them not having money is not a part of their image, or their relationship with money, how they manage money is not a part of their self-image, you know, where they use it in a constructive way, where they grow those resources. If that's not part of their image, they're going to lose it. Then we see it all the time. Within all these millions, within a couple of years, gone. Or, you know, someone like Michael Jackson is a classic example. You talk about Paul McCartney. I love that song the two of them done together. I think they done two, right, Emma?
Two what?
Stay.
Oh, yeah.
Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson. I mean, they collaborated on one or two songs, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
The Girl Is Mine, that's Paul McCartney, you know?
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Michael Jackson, on the other hand, he had a poor self-image that was fed to him by his father. His father was constantly on him about his nose and certain ideas. And we all know what he done to himself as a result, because the internal mechanism, you know, was just, I mean, he wasn't comfortable in his own skin. So, I mean, you're talking about someone like Paul McCartney, that just tells you that his self-image is, and I mean, that's the true measure of success, I think, Emma, is when somebody has achieved a fair level of success and they're humble people. That to me, because, you know, once you lose the plot in relation to success and money,
yeah, that's
you were gonna say, sorry?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And actually thinking about it, I've recently watched Arnold, the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. It's just absolutely tremendous. And I was really thinking about that, but something's cropped up here. So he's been successful in 3 different industries, you know, bodybuilder, movies, and then a politician. I mean, you know, the top, you know, the absolute elites. And when you talk to him, it's like he's so confident, and he moves through. But what is interesting is I was not aware, because I don't really listen to the news, and it's, you know, it doesn't make any difference to me, that he was not married to Maria Shriver anymore. And that really jumped in my head, that he was so successful in all these areas, and he got basically the perfect life, didn't he? So he had the perfect career, the perfect wife, the perfect family, but he messed it up. He messed it up. And to me, that shows that there must be something within his self-image that, again, kind of pulled him back and jeopardized that. And so, you know, it's so many elements within that self-image that caused him to jeopardize that. And what a terrible shame. I was like, oh no, I couldn't believe it. So I'd missed rather a big chunk there.
So just excuse me again. Quick example I'd like to give, Emma, with relation to your stories in how powerful shift in the self-image can be for you. I left my full-time employment in 2019, 1st of October 2019, and I came full-time into the business that I'm currently in, that's speaking, consulting, and coaching. And to say that was scary would be an understatement, because 2 households depending on me. I've got a little 9-year-old. Well, at that time he was 5 years old, depending on me to provide. But I went through the fear anyway, and I came into the business full time. And at that time, I belonged to a business network called BNI, Business Networking International, biggest, largest networking organization in the world. I'm sure many of you know of BNI. I know Emma. That's actually how Emma and I met, to BNI. And our area director at that time, Liesel, I said, Liesel, can you give me a couple of suggestions to really get the business network moving for my business now? Because I said to her, it's make or break. She gave me 3 suggestions. She said, firstly, I'm going to see if we can get you onto our speaker program to speak at the International Networking Week event in February 2020. But I want you to look at the timing, right? Secondly, she said, I want you to visit another BNI chapter, because there's obviously chapters, these little groupings of business networks all over the place, all over the world. I want you to visit another BNI chapter outside of your home chapter every week. And then when you're at those chapters, look for members that you resonate with and reach out to them, set up one-to-ones. And when you're sitting down with them, I want you to try and find a way to help them. Those are the 3 suggestions she gave me. So she managed to get me onto that speaker program for the International Networking Week event. There were 400 people in the auditorium that morning. So some really nice visibility and credibility that was created there. I was also visiting those BNI chapters, as you suggested, every week. I was having a ton of one-to-ones, and things really started picking up speed. And boom, March 2020, the pandemic hits, and we went into hard lockdown in South Africa. Everything ground to a halt. No monthly seminars, no in-person one-to-ones. But, and to be honest, those first couple of months after the pandemic hit, Emma, and you've heard this story, and I was pulling from all over just to keep the boat floating. But what I started doing was, instead of spending an hour on my mindset every day, I was spending 2 hours. And I really went hard in terms of upgrading my self-image. Like I really did. I got an 18-minute self-image script, and I was listening to it over and over and visualizing and really, embedding it into my mind. A couple of months later, I was featured on the BNI International Business Booster series. So they ran this international webinar series during the pandemic. And I reached out to, one of the people at head office, BNI head office, and I was given a slot, just an hour webinar. And there were about 265 people online, Emma being one of them. And from that single presentation, after being petrified of walking away from my full-time employment in 2019, from that single presentation, I made my entire 2019 annual income in 1 month during the pandemic, during some of the toughest economic climates. Now, I'm not sharing that to impress you, but to impress upon you what's possible when you align your self-image with what it is that you want, when you upgrade that internal thermostat, when you, install the concept of self that's really going to get you to where you're going in terms of the amount of money you want to earn, or in terms of, the property portfolio that you see, as an eventuality, or that's part of your vision. You've got to align your self-image with what it is that you want.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, an incredible story there. So I'm just sort of checking time. Did you want to tell us another story, or should we go on now to how we can do what we can do to change our self-image? Because it's not as easy, is it, as just going, oh, right, I'm just going to change it. As we know, going back to the autopilot and all of those things, unless you have an emotional impact that lady had when I was talking to her, there's going to be some work and effort going on.
So I'll tell you another quick story, and then we can give your audience some tools to help upgrade their self-image. So I worked with a lady in 2018, the early part of 2018, a lady by the name of Terry Lee Oliphant from South Africa. And when she joined the coaching, she was a senior lecturer at one of the top universities here in Johannesburg. And she has a PhD in mathematics, Emma. I think you've also heard her story. A PhD in mathematics. She spent probably close to a decade achieving her PhD, with all of her other degrees. And yes, she's a senior lecturer at Wits University. And these first year students were intimidating her. Her self-talk, our self-image, right? Her self-talk was, they're going to ask me something that I can't answer, or they're going to figure out I'm a phony, or, all this negative self-talk. And when she worked with us and we got into this concept around self-image, and we showed her how it worked and explained that it was an automatic mechanism that was constantly, moving her back to a default position. And we also explained how it came about at the moment of conception and in her early life. As a young child, she was teased, like really teased. I mean, when she explained the story, she had bad skin and she was very skinny, and, she used to get a hard time from, the kids at school and, preschool, and the kids in early schooling, and also obviously from her environment, the community she grew up in. And what she realized with the self-image from there, this negative concept of self, was affecting who she showed up as, a lecturer. And excuse me, Emma. And understanding this, she went about to upgrading. She created the script of herself as a very confident, self-assured lecturer. Through a process, she embedded it into her subconscious. And one day she says, it's almost like she woke up and she was a different person living in a different world.
Do you want some water, Lee? I'll give him some water.
Emma, excuse me for a moment. I'm going to grab some water.
So what Lee is talking about for me has been really, really powerful. And I have taken a lot of time and effort to understand what it is to behave in a different way. So even sort of simple things, just the way I walk. I used to walk along with, you know, looking at the floor, pretty much from a practical perspective, actually. We live on a farm and I could have fallen over. But now it's so different to walk with your head down. Now I walk with my head held high, I have my shoulders back, and it completely makes me feel so different just doing some small activity like that. So I'm going to pass back to Lee. He's on again.
Thanks, Emma. So this lady, Terry, wrote the self-image script of herself as a really confident, really good lecturer, and she kept replaying it. In fact, she was rewriting it every morning for a number of weeks, and she embedded that idea into her subconscious mind. And she says one day she woke up and she felt like a different person living in a different world. And she went to a lecture hall that morning, and she says she stepped out in front of the lectern. She was handling these first-year students very creatively, and she really was stepping into her power, right? And she says the students came a couple of them came up to her after the lesson, and they said, you know, ma'am, that was one of the most powerful lectures that we've ever, you know, teaching that I've ever been involved in or that I've received. Thank you. And that was all down. It wasn't what was happening in her outside world. It's what her concept of self was happening on the inside. So I just wanted to share that story as well.
Fantastic. No, I love it. So, you know, what can we do then? What is it that we can do to shift that, to make those changes? And we've already spoken that, you know, it may be in life that we have to change our self-image a number of times. So it may be that we're at a ceiling, especially if this is a new concept to us. We've probably hit that ceiling. What is it that we can do to really change that self-image?
So you've got to think about who is the person who has already achieved the income goal that you are going after. Who is that property investor who owns all of those properties, who is managing all of those properties, you know, who is deriving a specific amount of income from their property portfolio? Who is that person? We've got to ask ourselves, who is that person? And then you've got to ask yourself, you know, how does that person walk? How do they talk? How do they dress? You know, where do they eat? Where do they shop? How often do they travel? You know, do they travel economy, business, first class? Now, how do they live? Where do they live? You know, this self-image script, you want to see yourself as the writer of this script. I think of it like a Hollywood script. You're the writer, you're the producer, you financing the movie, and this movie is your life, right? And you ask yourself, who is that person? Like down to a T. How do they show up in terms of managing their staff? How do people react to them? What type of energy or what type of impression do they leave people with who come into their environment or come into, you know, their proximity? What impression do you leave people with? How do you always leave people better off? And you create a very detailed script of that person. So remember, you are writing this movie script, and who is that person? And then through a process of repetition, you take that idea and you move it into your subconscious mind. You basically overwrite the old image of self. And that can be done just like Terry did by rewriting that script every morning, even if it's 1 page or 2 pages, 6 pages, mine is 7 pages long and I rewrote it, not every day, but once a week on a Sunday for a number of weeks, right? I rewrote it but I listened to it. So a tool that you can use to embed it, really powerful tool, is there's in the App Store and I think in the Google Play Store, you can download an application called Voice Loop. Voice Loop. And you can record yourself reading your self-image script. A suggestion is to have some background music playing, like some soft classical or maybe some uplifting music playing in the background while you read the script, because I find that with the music, it allows quicker entry into your subconscious mind. And then you read that script, you record it onto this Voice Loop app, and you repeat it over and over in terms of listening to it. And when you're listening to it, you visualize it. Powerful tools in terms of upgrading or overriding the current self.
Amazing, amazing, incredibly powerful. And yeah, I certainly have my voice loop that in fact I can just hear the music tinkering away while we're even thinking about that, and all of those parts. And what is amazing is once you've had your self-image script for a period of time, how you suddenly, as you're listening to it, it's like, wow, the things that seem so beyond anything that I could ever imagine are actually just normal everyday things now. And that's like really crazy to understand that. And they can be little things to massive things, but each of those steps as you're going through is really incredible. So yeah, I really appreciate that. This is one of my massive favorite topics, I suppose, because I can see that I've had to do some big changes and I can still see massive more changes that are happening as we move forward. But if people wanted to find out a bit more about you, I know you do other sort of regular webinars as well. Where's the best place to come and find you, Lee? I've put a link in the chat, and once this goes onto YouTube, guys, as well, which is at Emma Howitt Pure Abodes on YouTube. There'll be the long video, and then we'll break it up into shorts as well. So we'll pop a link in there. But just for everyone else listening, where might they find you?
So Emma, I'm actually running a webinar next Thursday called Entrepreneurs: How to Clear the Blocks to Your Abundance. Some really powerful concepts, and if the idea around self-image resonated with you today, I want to invite you onto this webinar. Now, during that hour, we go much deeper because I can show you visual impressions of how this thing works in terms of the mind. And we can really show you in terms of the cybernetic mechanism, how to shift it, and I'll explain all of that. So if you're keen, join us. Emma, I think she says she's going to pop the link in here. There's a limited seating. I think we've only got 100 seats, and we've got a couple of registrations. It's moving already. So if you're keen on joining us, hop over to that link and book your spot.
Brilliant. Well, as always, Lee, thank you so much for sharing your time. Really, genuinely, very much appreciated. What you talk about is really powerful and it has been life-changing for me. So really appreciate that. And thanks, Yuri, for finding Lee. I might have to get a backup help with my tech, but there we go. But thanks a lot, guys, and take care and see you very soon.